Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: U.S. tariffs are making a dent in China's economy. We're on President Trump's comment about Chinese factories reportedly suffering.
Their factories are closing all over China because we're not taking their product. We don't want their product unless they're going to be fair with us.
Beijing is standing firm that it won't be first to reach out for trade talks with the U.S., but how are Chinese manufacturers faring amid the trade war? We spoke to locals in China for first-hand information.
The situation is extremely severe. We immediately couldn't handle it after those tariffs were imposed.
And a Chinese-born U.S. resident has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. A Chinese court handed out the punishment for a crime that settled almost 25 years ago. A man who worked as aide to a German lawmaker charged with acting as a Chinese spy, he allegedly passed on sensitive European Union documents to the Chinese regime. President Trump says he hopes to make a trade deal with Beijing, adding that factories are closing all over China.
I hope we're going to make a deal with China. We're talking to China, but their factories are closing all over China because we're not taking their product. We don't want their product unless they're going to be fair with us.
His remark follows official data showing that U.S. tariffs on China are making a dent in the country's economy. China is already seeing a manufacturing decline. That's according to a report about the country's official index for activity in the sector. The number came in at 49, a 1.5% drop compared to March. This means China's manufacturing activities have slowed and are sitting at their lowest level since 2023. Chinese authorities said the drop was driven by sharp changes in the external environment. In an apparent jab at the U.S., it added there are no winners in trade wars. Official data also shows a plunge in new export orders, now at the lowest rate in 3 years. Trump said he saw reports coming out saying China is doing very poorly right now.
I don't want that to happen to China. I like the president a lot, President Xi. I don't want it to happen. I was actually saddened to hear it, but they are getting absolutely hammered in China. And, they're sending boats, the biggest boats in the world, carrying cargo like nobody's ever seen before. These are the biggest boats in the world, biggest cargo ships in the world. And they're coming and they're turning around in the Pacific Ocean. They're doing a big U-turn and going back because they don't want the goods because 145% tariff.
Trump also mentioned China's theft of American intellectual property. The practice costs the U.S. up to $600 billion every year. U.S. President Donald Trump held a campaign-style rally in Michigan on Tuesday to celebrate his first 100 days in office. In his speech, he touted what he called a series of economic victories. Watch.
This is the best, they say, 100-day start of any president in history, and everyone is saying it. We've just gotten started. You haven't even seen anything yet. It's all just kicking in.
Despite recent polling showing dwindling confidence in Trump's economic vision, Trump cast his steep tariffs on China and other trading partners as a lifeline for places like Michigan and said they could lead to a resurgence in domestic manufacturing.
They all want to come back to Michigan and build cars again. You know why? Because of our tax and tariff policy. You finally have a champion for workers in the White House, and instead of putting China first, I'm putting Michigan first, and I'm putting America first.
Polls show Americans have cooled on aspects of Trump's performance in recent weeks. In a 3-day Reuters Ipsos poll completed on Sunday, 42% of respondents approved of Trump's performance so far, while 53% disapproved. That's down from 47% approval in the Reuters Ipsos poll in January. Just 36% of respondents approved of Trump's economic stewardship, the lowest level in his current or prior term.
President Trump is downplaying fears that tariffs on Chinese imports will lead to higher costs for consumers. In an interview aired on Tuesday, ABC News anchor Terry Moran said the 145% tariffs on Chinese goods are, quote, basically an embargo and will, quote, raise prices on everything from electronics to clothing to building houses. Here's how Trump responded.
China probably will eat those tariffs, but at 145, they basically can't do much business with the United States.
To ease tariff policy slightly, President Trump has agreed to give car makers credit to offset the duties. They're worth up to 15% of the value of the cars automakers assemble in the U.S. Companies can use these credits to offset the cost of imported parts, giving them some breathing room to shift their supply chains back to America. The Chinese regime has vowed to fight Washington to the end on trade, but are Chinese factory owners on board with Beijing? We interviewed manufacturers in China to learn more about their situation. NTD's Flora Hua brings us the story.
Chinese social media posts reveal a troubling picture. Containers are piling up across the busiest ports in China. Factories are putting operations on hold, giving their workers extended leave. Li is a factory owner in southern China.
Now, many factory workers have been put on break, and most factories are turning to the domestic market. It's become a price war with intense internal competition. A lot of factories just can't keep up anymore.
A factory owner in the port city of Touts says his business used to make at least $700,000 a year, but ever since the tariff war launched,
we've basically been in a shutdown state for the past week. It also involves returning orders. The market competition has been quite intense.
Zooming out, how are China's declining exports affecting the second largest economy as a whole? A business owner from China's tech hub, Shenzhen, shared his concerns with us.
The situation is extremely severe. We immediately couldn't handle it after those tariffs were imposed. And it's not just the factories. The retail sector, food and beverage services, pharmaceuticals, all kinds of businesses, they're all pushed off the cliff. The whole economy is in trouble and people are struggling to get by.
China recently wrapped up its largest trade fair, the Canton Fair. Many see it as a benchmark that reflects the country's trade situation. Some exporters told NTD's sister media, the Epoch Times, that this year's trade fair was much emptier compared to before. Many merchants also wrapped up their booths early. Some fairgoers said it was rare to see clients from the U.S. and Europe this year. Analysts say trade between the U.S. and China essentially broke once tariffs topped 100%. Danny Lau owns a manufacturing business in Hong Kong.
The U.S. market is such a big market that it's difficult to replace. Most of our profits come from the U.S. market, so without that market, it would be difficult for us.
Most of his U.S. clients have reached out to cancel orders and have suggested they would stop going businesses with him if the trade war persists. Social media posts and commentary reflecting the hardships of Chinese business are largely being censored inside China. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Turning now to the public health sector, China dismissed all allegations that it mishandled the COVID-19 pandemic on Wednesday. The country where the first COVID-19 cases were found instead argues that the U.S. might have been the origin of the virus. China's top health body issued that comment as a state response. The move comes 2 weeks after the White House endorsed the theory that the pandemic likely leaked from a Chinese state-run lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Professor Sean Lin served as a microbiologist in the U.S. Army. He says the Chinese report did not address a number of questions surrounding the issue. That's including why researchers from the Wuhan lab showed COVID-like symptoms in fall 2019 ahead of the global outbreak, and why China covered up outbreaks in the early stages of the pandemic. China says it's willing to work with Boeing. This after China just sent 3 Boeing-made planes back to the U.S. Chinese Airlines previously ordered the aircraft but turned them away upon delivery. That's in retaliation against U.S. tariffs. Boeing last week said it was looking to resell potentially dozens of aircraft, and it may already have potential buyers. Malaysia Airlines, as well as a new airline in Saudi Arabia, are both eyeing Boeing-made jets.
The CEO of Saudi Arabian startup airline Riyadh Air said his company is willing to purchase Boeing jets originally meant for China. The CEO has said travel demand to and from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia's capital, is strong, and his company is looking to expand capacity before it officially starts flights in the last part of 2025. The company has placed orders for jets from both Airbus and Boeing. Boeing has also said demand for its aircraft is still strong. That's despite China recently sending 3 Boeing jets it ordered back to the United States. And Boeing as well is looking to reassign dozens of jets ordered by China but rejected due to China's ongoing trade dispute with the United States.
An American permanent resident has been sentenced to 5 years in prison in China. David Lee was convicted of, quote, provoking trouble, a broad charge China often uses to target those it considers a threat to social order. He was born in China, but is a U.S. green card holder. The charge stems from an incident in 2001 where Lee was involved in several fights that resulted in a person's death. While Lee played only a minor role, he was released at the time without being charged. For the next 2 decades, Lee continued to conduct business in China without issue until he was detained again on April 23rd. According to his family, the case highlights the unfair and unpredictable nature of law enforcement in China. A U.S. organization that advocates for political prisoners in China said the sentence was too severe. The group also noted that Lee's arrest came during a round of U.S.-China negotiations focused on the release of American prisoners. Australia held its final election debate on Sunday between incumbent Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and opposition leader Peter Dutton. The two candidates voiced opposing views on China's growing influence in Australia.
In the Oval Office,
Peter Dutton described Beijing as, quote, the biggest threat to Australia's national security. Albanese, on the other hand, took a more passive approach, saying that Australia's relationship with China is complex. That's because while China seeks to influence the region, they're also a major trading partner. Earlier in April, a Chinese intelligence ship was spotted off Australia's southern coast. The vessel was suspected of carrying out spying operations. It happened following the route of an undersea cable, a vital data highway that serves Australia's economy and infrastructure. While senior analysts voiced concerns over the ship's presence, Prime Minister Albanese remained more neutral. He stated he would, quote, prefer it not be there in light of mounting national security pressure. Despite China's growing influence in the region, Australia remains a key ally to the U.S. through the AUKUS partnership. This partnership is a security pact that was formed in 2021 between the U.S., the U.K., and Australia. It focuses on sharing advanced military technology to strengthen regional defense within the Indo-Pacific region. Coming up, a main goal for Washington is to bring back American manufacturing and become less reliant on China. House lawmakers say it's not just an economic issue, but a matter of national security, too.
We gave China the lead, and through turning over our supply chain to them, we gave them in plain sight hidden control of our national security and our economic security.
A man who worked as aide to a German lawmaker charged with acting as a Chinese spy, he allegedly passed on sensitive European Union documents to the Chinese regime. And 4 former pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong are released from prison. They were locked up for years over their efforts to counter the Chinese Communist Party. What's next for them? That and more after this break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. House lawmakers say that bringing back American manufacturing and cutting reliance on China are more than just good economic moves, noting they're matters of national security as well. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports on a Tuesday hearing.
Republican Chair Rep. Eric Burleson, during a hearing by the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs, said that in the 1950s, the U.S. accounted for 40% of the global manufacturing and now accounts for 16%. He said that over time, leaders favored globalization and over-regulated domestic manufacturing, as well as created huge obstacles for permitting for new manufacturing. He said that this stunted manufacturing in the United States, and companies slowly started putting more manufacturing offshores into foreign nations. And he said that this is when China stepped in and filled the void.
China leaned in heavily on cheap labor, slave labor, and suicide-inducing labor conditions to achieve the manufacturing share that it possesses today. And China's position as the current world leader in manufacturing poses economic, military, and national security threats to the United States.
Burleson said that easing the regulatory burden as well as streamlining permitting will help bring back more American manufacturing. Now, Ranking Member Maxwell Frost said that Democrats Democrats stand united in creating more high-paying American manufacturing jobs in communities. He said that he doesn't agree with the current administration's tariff policies as a way to do this, and he wants to put the American worker at the front and center.
I look forward to working with my colleagues from both parties, as well as workers, labor representatives, private industry, to continue the manufacturing boom that was started by Democrats over the past 4 years. But this effort must never be at the expense of safety, dignity, and prosperity of the American worker.
Subcommittee member Rep. Clay Higgins said that decoupling from relying on China for manufacturing is also a moral and human rights issue.
Cheap products produced in abhorrent conditions on foreign soil, subsidized by communism, and produced by child labor and slave labor, not only should they not be available for a cheaper price on our shelf, they shouldn't be available at all on American shelves.
The subcommittee invited a few expert witnesses in to share their perspectives.
We weakened our supply chains to save a buck in the short run. We gave China the lead, and through turning over our supply chain to them, we gave them in plain sight hidden control of our national security and our economic security.
And the only way to reindustrialize this country is to leapfrog the Chinese system, which has been built on the back of slave labor conditions, enormous CCP policy-led energy subsidies, raw material subsidies, that are simply not a level playing field with American innovation.
And another witness said that offshoring critical industries is not just an economic initiative, but also a national security mandate. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Now we turn to Europe. A former aide to a German lawmaker has been charged with spying for the Chinese communist regime. He allegedly passed on sensitive European Union documents to the regime. The suspect, Jian Guo, is a German citizen who worked for Maximilian Krah of Germany's right-wing Alternative for Germany party. He's accused of working for Chinese intelligence services while working as an aide to the politician from 2019 until his arrest in 2024. He also allegedly spied on Chinese dissidents in Germany. The prosecutor alleges he obtained more than 500 documents in his espionage work for China's Ministry of State Security. Another suspect, identified only as Yaqi X, was also charged. She's accused of helping Guo gather intelligence data. She is also accused of leaking logistics data from Germany's Leipzig airport, including information about the transport of military equipment. France is looking to crack down on Chinese e-commerce giants like Shein and Temu. This comes after authorities observed a massive influx of low-cost Chinese products into the country. France is also urging the European Union to impose regulations on these platforms. NTD's international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
The trade war between the U.S. and China has also affected Europe, as several European countries report a surge in dumped Chinese products on their market. Last year, 1.5 billion parcels, mostly from China, entered France, averaging just around $10 each. Authorities are concerned with this trend, which poses a threat not only to local producers, but also to consumers. On Tuesday, 4 French ministers unveiled a plan to tackle the flood of low-cost parcels from China. To protect consumers, the government will triple inspections this year, checking product safety, labeling, and environmental claims. It's also looking to the EU to end customs duty exemption for parcels under $170 to protect local businesses. Yann Rivoalan is president of the French Women's Prêt-à-Porter Federation. He says the influx of Chinese products has led to around 10,000 job losses over the past 2 years and the closure of several fashion brands. He also says French fashion brands are unable to compete.
Every week, brands send me copies of counterfeit products made in China. First, our designs are being stolen. Second, the employees of Shein or Temu are being exploited. They're paid a pittance and forced to work from 75 to over 100 hours a week, with barely 1 day off a month. This is clearly unacceptable. They also commit tax fraud by declaring underreported sales figures.
According to the government, over 90% of these products are unsafe for consumers. However, Rivoalan says the new measures fall far short and should be aligned with the stronger U.S. actions against such platforms.
It's totally ridiculous compared to what the United States is doing with $100 on each of these packages. So we're in a situation where we know that over 90% of products are dangerous for the French, dangerous for consumers, for our jobs, and for the planet. And yet we're putting in place a small measure with barely 10% tax potential. If the French state is doing its duty, which is to protect us, then it must act immediately to stop these platforms from selling these products.
The EU launched a probe into Chinese platforms in February. However, Rivo says the process of curbing their access to the European market is too slow compared to the looming threat to the industrial sector. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
4 former pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong are out of prison after serving more than 4 years for their activities related to countering the Chinese Communist Party. Their release was a tightly controlled event, with police blocking roads and press kept away. What's more, they won't be allowed to run in Hong Kong's upcoming legislative elections in 2025. 4 former pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong were freed from prison after serving more than 4 years behind bars. Claudia Mo, Kwok Ha-ki, Jeremy Tam, and Gary Fang were among the 47 activists convicted of subversion under Hong Kong's national security law imposed by Beijing. Their case, widely known as the 47 Democrats trial, drew international attention. On Tuesday, the 4 became the first group to be released, quietly reuniting with their families. But their release did not follow normal procedures. Security was tight around the prisons, with a heavy police presence and roads restrictions in the area. Members of the press were kept at a distance. They saw only vehicles with closed curtains leaving the facilities. The arrests date back to 2021. Out of the 47 campaigners arrested, 45 were convicted in 2024 with sentences of up to 10 years. Only 2 were acquitted. In 2019, large-scale pro-democracy protests erupted in Hong Kong. The Chinese regime spurred the Hong Kong government to clamp down on the democratic movement through a series of political operations. Beijing also imposed the national security law on the city to tighten its control and punish democratic opposition. Looking ahead, Hong Kong is scheduled to hold its next legislative election in December 2025. These 4 former lawmakers will not be eligible to run. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.